So this term in devotions, we have been focusing on different aspects of this man Jesus that we meet in the Bible. And look, it's the perfect time of the year to be thinking about this as we approach Christmas. After all, while we live in a world now that says that Christmas is all about family and gift giving, at the heart of this celebration in our culture is Christ. That is Christmas, Jesus Christ, and his birth into our world. So today, we are looking at the idea of Jesus being the bread of life. Now, to be honest, this is a bit of a weird idea, and if you spend enough time in the Bible reading Jesus' stories in the 4 Gospels, you can come across some kind of weird sayings that he has, and this is one of them. Look, sometimes this is because Jesus is speaking over 2,000 years ago in a completely different culture and a completely different time, and sometimes those cultural ideas that he's speaking about get a little bit lost on us. But sometimes Jesus likes to play with words in a way that actually made his meaning a little bit hard to understand on purpose, especially for those around him that were trying to have a go at him at the time. So this idea of the bread of life comes particularly from a book of the Bible called the Gospel of John. It is right after Jesus has fed 5,000 men using only loaves and fishes that he multiplies out. This is in a time when the majority of people that Jesus was speaking to, look, they were pretty poor and they didn't have a fridge full of food sitting at home like we do. So finding someone who could just generate food from nowhere and handing it out gathered Jesus quite the following. So right after in this story, he's fed this huge crowd and he disappears from them. So they go looking for him. And in this story, they've just found him. And this records this little interaction in the book of John that he has with the crowd. So they rock up and Jesus calls them out and says, hey, look, you're not really following me or looking for me because you think I'm sent from God. You really just want more food. And I'm telling you instead to pursue a food that is greater than just bread. Instead, pursue food that gives you eternal life. And so the crowd respond and they say, okay, what do we have to do to get this food you're talking about? And Jesus says, oh, look, it's really simple. You just have to believe in the person that God sent. That is him. But rather than understanding that Jesus was talking about himself right now, the crowd say, well, how do we know that you're this person? Look, maybe if you perform more miracles and, I don't know, maybe give us some more food. And Jesus stops them and says, guys, you don't need more bread because I am the bread of life. I am the food that gives you eternal life. Now, the story goes on a little bit from here, but you can see already that Jesus is he actually talking about himself being bread? Does he literally think that he's made of delicious, fluffy bread right out of the oven that people can eat? Like, can you take a bite of his arm? Well, no, he's using a metaphor. You see, when we eat food, like bread, it can be great. It's tasty, it gives us energy, it keeps us going, but only for a little while. You know, we need to keep going back and having more food after that time. And if we don't, well, we eventually get hungry and we die. Jesus is really saying, look, we chase after all sorts of things in our life that we think will fill us and keep us going. For you, maybe, look, if you just find the right job when you're grown up, well, then you'll be happy and fulfilled. If you just have enough money to buy all the things you want, then you'll be really happy. Or maybe if you just have all the right hobbies and the lifestyles and you live in the nice house, then you'll have a joyful life. Look, maybe you take it even deeper. If you have a good family life, then everything will be great because I'll be around people that I love and that love me and that build me up. But Jesus points out here that these things don't really fulfill us. They might be good, they might satisfy us for a while, but like food, eventually they won't. And look, even if they give us a level of happiness in this life, Jesus is saying, well, actually, they don't extend past death. And Jesus is pointing to the fact that we ultimately have a bigger need in our life. And that need is to come into a new and a right relationship with the God of the universe. And Jesus says, look, the only way you can do that, the only way you can have eternal life is by coming to know him. Now, I think there's also a second little learning that we can have from this story. One of the key challenges that Jesus throws back to these people is, look, hey, you look like you're following me and you look like you want to be on board, but are you actually really here because you believe that I'm sent from God to save you? Or do you really just kind of want the perks of some free food and maybe some miracles that you might receive? Look, and I wonder, as we've talked to you about Jesus as a school, if maybe you've been attracted to the idea of Jesus, but maybe not because you really understand the message of the Bible, but because you think maybe it will fix the problems in your life. Jesus is actually pretty clear in other places in the gospel that there's no promise at all that following Jesus is going to fix the things in this world. Some people like to preach that, look, if you follow Jesus, he has great things in store for you, and he wants to fulfill all of your wildest dreams. And maybe for some Christians that's been their life experience, but for many, many others, they actually don't necessarily get those basic things fixed, and it's not an explicit promise of the Bible. Instead, the promise of the Bible is this: God created the world with a design, and that design was to work in partnership with humans to rule over creation. But instead of working with God, humans have decided to reject God and to rule over creation themselves. The story of the Bible is the big picture of God continuing to reach out to his people, continuing to reach out to humanity, but humanity continue to reject God's rule. So God ultimately had to send his son Jesus into the world to finish the problem of sin and rejection of God once and for all. Yet, even as Jesus came into the world, many continued to reject him, and as we see in this story, even many of the people who might have looked like they were starting to follow him, really it was because they thought he'd fix the little things in their life, not because they understand the biggest problem, the biggest promise of a new relationship with the God of the universe. So here's a final reflection question for you today. As we approach Christmas and we remember Jesus entering the world, do you think of Jesus as someone that you can kind of just go to and he'll fix your problems when you shoot off a quick prayer to him? Or are you really coming with a true understanding of the bigger promise of the Bible, a new relationship and eternal life with God?